first time ever, and I'm probably in big trouble for this being the first time ever. My wife, Rachel, sits across the table from us. Welcome. You weren't even on the leadership drip. What a terrible husband I am.
Well, no, you said it, not me.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, apparently I'm a terrible husband. That might be what we try to solve today. Why I'm so bad.
Right.
Also at the show today, for maybe his third or fourth appearance, is Winston the dog. We'll see how long that lasts before he decides to chime in the conversation.
Yes, he's awfully snuggly today, though. So maybe he'll last.
It's been a snow day, or snow weekend here in Cleveland.
Yes, for sure.
For our friends who aren't familiar with the South, when it snows here, the world stops. So since about Friday morning, I guess,
yes,
the snow started, we've been out of the house 3 times. I've been out of the house 3 times. You've been out of the house once.
Yes,
we got groceries. Mm-hmm. Finally, we were able to find some groceries.
Yes. Grapes seem to have been like the commodity this go around.
Yeah. And bananas were tough to find.
Yes.
So all the kids out there with grapes and bananas that will now rot because they ate Doritos all weekend.
Probably.
It's probably true. Like our kids. Well, what I wanted to do is get you on the show. Well, maybe this will be a regular thing. I think it might. We talked a couple times about the importance of the things we did as the Collectives. The Collectives was the church we started, which kind of spun out into the podcast. You've had some recent conversations with students who are no longer students and the sort of their vantage point of it.
Yeah.
So I think we may spend a couple weeks talking about the importance of the church plant, why we did it, why we closed it. But probably before we have that conversation, we kind of publicly got to have the other conversation.
Oh. Which one is that?
The one we don't talk about publicly. Well, we have. You shared about it, I think, once on Kelly's podcast, our friend Kelly's podcast. We shared it at the church, the Collectives, in what we call Couch Conversations. And then I shared it on Ainsley B's podcast. We can put those podcasts in the show notes. We don't have the church conversation recorded, I don't think. If we did, we didn't publish it. So I'll start with the question we get, especially from the university students. And then I'll let you answer how you answer it.
Okay.
So the question we get when they find out that we are Lee graduates, that we both attended Lee, is this question. Did you meet at Lee?
Yes, we did. I usually just leave it at that, unless they probe more.
So yes, we did, okay, but that's not the full extent of the story.
No, it is not.
And you have to be sort of inner circle. We sponsor a ministry called The Backyard, which is a tutoring ministry at Lee. But we host them once a month for tacos, and there's a group of girls that call it, Backyard After Dark?
Yeah.
And they get the full story. They kind of get that inner circle. But so we're invited all of you, our friends listening now, into this sort of inner circle post-taco conversation that we have with college students, because it's important to the fuller conversation of the Collectives and why the timing,
right?
Why we didn't think it was even possible at times. So what's the rest of the story of, yes, we met at Lee?
Well, we did meet at Lee. We met in the fall of 1998. I was 18 and a freshman. And you were not.
Make sure you say that. Make sure you say how young you were.
18, freshman, newly here from Florida, and you were not. And the reason we do take time to talk to sort of our backyard students about it is because we met at Backyard. That was where we met, literally in a backyard of this backyard ministry house that we did. And after my first Wednesday, I was all in and fully committed to Backyard, as I think you were as well.
Yeah.
So we became friends.
We did. I came to Lee that same fall, the wonderful fall of 1998, newly married, not to you.
Not to me.
Let's clarify. Transferred in as sort of a non-traditional student, took a year off after high school, spent 2 years at state school. That's widely told on conversations I've had. But came to Lee married, got married that summer, thinking that marriage and ministry were supposed to be in partnership.
They were at the time.
And they were. That was a very prominent conversation. Probably didn't need to get married as quickly as I did, and that's another conversation for another day. But we did meet and become friends. You were 18. We know, because we well documented that episode on the end of this episode. And I was married. And that's sort of the beginning point. Now, let's clarify. There was never
Right.
any funny business between the two of us.
No. And we were friends. I was friends with your wife at the time. And you actually, should we go there? Should we say that you did?
Go. You can say whatever you want.
That we did.
This is an uncensored episode.
You encouraged the guy that I married eventually to ask me out.
I did more than encourage. I think I highly, highly told him he should.
And he did.
And he did. And then over a time, the four of us were friends and spent time together. We would go out for Mexican and different things. There was only like 2 Mexican restaurants, so those were the only restaurants in town. So we met in 98, became friends. You eventually married the young man who's now no longer young, he's my age, to date you. And when even after you got married, we sort of remained friends as couples, which feels awkward, but it's the truth of it, and people knew that.
Right. Right.
And so you moved to Florida.
Yes.
You and your husband, which is weird to say because I'm your husband. Your ex-husband.
Yes.
Me and my ex-wife moved back to Wisconsin, where I was from, Northern Illinois, and sort of really separated ways in a lot of ways there. I think we had some communication.
Yeah, we stayed in contact for a couple of years and then sort of fell out of contact. This is shockingly in the days before social media. You had to call someone or email them if you wanted an update on their life.
It was pre-text.
Yes, there was no texting. Yes.
Yeah. So communication was very deliberate.
Right.
Like we weren't accidentally finding out about one another.
Right. And so you had to think to call somebody to kind of update them on your life. There wasn't this mass update happening daily, hourly, whatever people do now.
Yeah. Yeah. We were early Facebook, so we would get on Facebook and share what we ate that night.
That's true. I made tacos a lot. Apparently it's a favorite food.
Yeah. It still is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell our friends listening in whatever way you want to why you end up divorced. Not from me. Let's clarify. We're still married friends.
Yeah, we're happily married.
Doing it good.
In a very significant part of life, there was a ridiculous amount of unfaithfulness from engagement, dating. It was a constant. Things I didn't know about, things I did know partial truths about, and went ahead anyways. We did have two children together, and through multiple unfaithfulness and really tried very hard to work through things. Went through marital counseling, when there's sort of the proverbial straw that came out, what had happened. One time I found an instance I discovered. We went to some marital counseling, and thank God for the marriage counselor who shockingly made my ex-husband be honest with me about really how many times it had been in the 7 years at that time that we had been married. It was more times than years we'd been married that he had been unfaithful. And it wasn't what was terrible and hurtful even more in some ways was that it wasn't what you would call traditional affairs. These were hookups with men. And that was devastating, to say the least. And so after about 7.5, 8 years of marriage, my life quickly unraveled. I had a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. My daughter was about to start kindergarten, and my world just simply unraveled. And so that's how I sort of ended up divorced and single.
Yeah. I remember that season that, we were all friends, and we've said many times on many shows, I've talked about how important college friends are in sort of the longevity of life. They become the people that are the core people in your life.
Absolutely.
It seems like in adulthood.
Absolutely.
And so you and your ex-husband were in that sort of small circle of people that were like core friends. And I remember when the truth came out, being shocked, because I was like, we were friends. Like we hung out, we spent time together, we went to church together. All these things that had gone on during our time here as young adults at Lee. And I was like stunned that was the reality.
Right.
And I remember that just going like, no way, that's true. So you divorced 2010-ish. And lived this wonderful single life with 2 kids.
Yeah, it's great. Is that what we're calling it?
Your story.
Single parenting is not for the faint of heart. It is. Family structure was meant to be 2 parents and kids, and for multiple reasons.
So you single parent. 2010.
Yeah, and it was difficult. My parents actually relocated up here to Tennessee to be with me. I was working from home at the time, so that was a blessing in so many ways. I was teaching online. They moved in, helped me with the kids. We went through sort of a trial separation, and then just decided that it wasn't going to work. We were actually separated for over a year before things were final. Before we even began really the divorce process, because I wanted to know. I did not take it lightly. I wanted, if there was space to rebuild and to repair, I wanted to. And I really valued I valued marriage. I wanted things to work, and I wanted it to. If there's any way possible back from that betrayal, I wanted to take it. And after lots of counseling, both independently and together, I just decided there was no way that it could be salvaged, and it would never again be what it should be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was a single parent for a long time, like 6 or 7 years. It was difficult, to say the least.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I started my story in 1998. The story begins before that, but really the part you're concerned about listening today, for instance, that's where it began. I married in 98, moved to Lee. Rachael and I met at the backyard, as did my ex-wife. We all knew each other. And it's hard to describe in actual terms, because I think sometimes when you're young and married, you're young and dumb.
Yeah.
So mistakes were made. Most young marriages have bumps and rough patches, and like your story, there became sort of a series of infidelities. Not on my part, but on my ex-wife's part, who's now passed. But and I was taught, though coming from a divorced home, I was taught, like in the church, you don't divorce. You shouldn't divorce. Especially in the narrative was that in ministry, you didn't divorce.
For sure.
It was like the scarlet letter to divorce.
Yeah, the unpardonable sin.
And I remember just as a young minister, and in marital problems and going, especially during some seasons of infidelity, going, if I walk away from the marriage, I walk away from ministry, which learning now is not true.
Right.
But I was 27, 28, young and not bright. And so I stayed in a bad marriage, and the pattern, the cycle just kept going on,
Right.
Be a decent stretch and then a stretch of infidelity and a decent stretch and a stretch of infidelity. And I too went to counseling, and went to counseling, and as a Christian counselor, and we talked about this, my friend Rick, I 100% expected him to say, you need to fight for your marriage. Mm-hmm. And I spent about an hour and a half with him on the phone. We're doing counseling by phone, and he goes, you probably need to leave. And I was shocked. Not because it was the wrong thing, but I was like, you're a Christian. Christians are supposed to stay married. And the truth was, my ex-wife was not living as a believer. She had broken that covenant over and over. And Rick, my counselor, looked at me, or not looked, but we were on the phone. He said, this is a pattern that's not going to change. Right. So you can either stay in the pattern, or you can do the healthy thing and leave.
Right.
And that was the most freeing moment and probably day in my life of a very long stretch of time. A very hard season. A season that led me to get divorced, go through a custody hearing over some things that were taking place, and just some really bad parenting, we'll say that, by my ex-wife. In a really difficult season.
Yeah.
So you go through a difficult divorce. I went through a difficult divorce. My counselor friend, Rick, was actually here in Cleveland. We were doing counseling by phone once a week. I was traveling down probably every 6 weeks, maybe, for an in-person session. And we kind of had pizza.
Yeah. Yeah. And you reached out because it was something I had walked through, and you were like, help me, especially in the parenting side. That was where sort of all of our conversation started. It was, how do I navigate on this parenting side of having 2 houses and all of those things. It's also,
I really only know how to cook 4 things.
Well, that's true. I did help with some of that, hopefully.
I think so.
But I think that one of the important things to know is that why, and we talked to, when we've done premarital counseling for several couples at this point, and it's why we say really one of the only things you can't come back from is infidelity. And there are people who can, and I'm all for that. But I would say that anybody who does come back from infidelity would tell you they have 2 marriages. They have the marriage that happened before, and then they have a new marriage. There's very few that will tell you that everything is restored and like it was. It usually is a new commitment, a new covenant, because the covenant's broken once the infidelity happens. And that's one of the things I think that there's a lot of marital issues you can recover from, you can work through, you can go through counseling, you can do all of the things, and you can fight for on so many fronts. But if it's infidelity, you're going to have to make the decision on if you want a new marriage with that person or not. I think that's one of the things that we face as well.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think when we talk to people about marriage, when we do premarital counseling or marital counseling, even with some people who are married, I think the misnomer is that once you're divorced, you're quickly to recommend divorce.
Right.
Well, because this is what we do when the kids walk downstairs and we reset. Story of our life. We do have 5 total kids.
Yes, together. And a bonus and
an in-law.
Yes, in-law.
And the breaking news is that we've only shared somewhat publicly is my oldest Andrew and his wife are bringing us our first grandbaby in July.
It's a lot. It's exciting.
We've settled on Pops and Gigi.
Yes.
There will be no Meemaws and Peepaws.
No, that's not allowed.
Anyways,
That's a no.
We digress there. So we say all this. I'm going to steal a phrase from your father. Mm-hmm. I've said all this to say, it's a classic statement from your dad. We say all this to say, in light of our story, is when we start to talk ministry timelines, it makes sense now.
Right.
Because I was doing young adult ministry in Lexington for a while. You did young adult. You were dealing with and loving.
I mean, dealing with is probably accurate as well.
Some young adults here, some of the university students, some of the university athletes. You've been doing that. You've been doing that for
a long time.
A long time before we were ever together. Mm-hmm. And so when our lives come back together in 2017, those passion points married as well.
Yeah.
So the whole story of how we got together in our marriages previously and all those things and bring us to the point of going, okay, so there were these seasons apart where we were doing something so similar.
Right.
Why did you love college students?
That's an interesting question. It's one of my favorite age groups. I've taught for a long time. I tease the students that I teach now are obviously student teachers who are becoming teachers, and so I tell them that I really don't like children under the age of 12, which is true. It still holds true today, but the older they are, the better I like them. Also holds true for a lot of things, but college students have a special place because I think my experience as a college student was such a special time. Even though, again, I feel like I made maybe some poor decisions. Things weren't picture perfect about that time, But it was such a formative piece of my growing up into like maybe sort of the crowning glory of the growing up process in so many ways, was that college experience, and people who were in our lives then and who are still a part of our life actually, and the impact they had in mentoring and caring and all of those things. I kind of wanted just to, I guess, pay it forward in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I think that was the crowning glory. I think that might be right language for it. I spent 5 total years in undergraduate and a year outside of high school before that. So I was 24 graduating college. But that 3-year window here at Lee especially was so life altering. Not even changing, just altering. A mutual mentor and friend who, if you're a Lee University student now, you call him Dr. Lamb. We just knew him as Will, who chose us in a lot of ways, and made deep investment in our life.
Yeah, it still does.
It still does.
Yeah,
it's still one of the most trustworthy voices in our lives.
Yeah. There are some days I'm not sure our kids don't know that they're not family.
I think that's true. But there was something about that season of having people sort of like Jesus did, select you out of the crowd and into the inner circle and make such a powerful investment in you as a person, as a Christian. I mean, Dr. Lamb was not even working at Lee University at the time.
Right. He
was the one who had started Backyard, so he had some sort of Lee adjacent relationships, and there were other professors of Dr. Gary Riggins and Mrs. Gill, and I had some professors in the School of Theology and Ministry, but that relationship with William was so vital that all I knew to do was duplicate what was done.
Right.
The rule of 6 words that William teaches, and I guess he still teaches it. I don't know. I call it the rule of 6 words. I made it the title, but he taught the lesson. But it comes out of the Gospels, and he says, freely you have received, freely give.
Yeah.
And so everything William invested in us, we were responsible to give away.
Yeah.
And you and I took that very literally and very seriously.
Very seriously.
To the point that today we are still investing in young adults and college students.
Yeah, they'll be here Tuesday night.
We will be having tacos Tuesday night. Why did you not get away from it, though? I mean, why did it... So why did it capture you so much? Because we have friends who walk the same road with William and others, but why did that capture you so much?
Why did college students, young adult... It's such a weird incubator of time. They're grown, but not really. They don't need a mama, but they do. It is unique in every facet of space. And I had gotten away, I would say, when I had little kids and I was in sort of the throes of little kid parenting. I had some I adopted who I still have now. They were older high school, going into college. And there was just something magical for me about that age that I was so excited for them. Sometimes I hear kindergarten teachers talk about the magic of a kindergartner, or first grader learning to read and all these kind of things that happen. It is amazing. But I feel that way about college freshmen, that they come and it's like their first time at Disney or something. They're wide-eyed, they're excited, they're nervous, they're anxious. They're independent all at the same time, and it's for me it's magical, and that seems such an overplay, but it's magical that they are at this weird crossroads of life, and again they need somebody to walk with them, but not necessarily a parent. There are things through the years, and like I said, we've been at this a long time, formally and informally. There are things that students have told me through the years that they would never breathe to a parent, just for many, many reasons. But the response they got was probably that of a parent. And so it becomes this interesting relationship of mentoring and caring. I think people who have good mentors typically can be a good mentor. And that's sort of where I find myself, is that I had some really good ones. And so I want to continue to do that in that sort of magical phase. What about you?
Well, I think what you said about mentorship, I want to touch on that. I've done ministry a long time, and there's a clear delineation between those who've had mentors and those who haven't, and their understanding of what's asked of them.
Right.
In a mentor discipling relationship. If you've never had that, you don't understand it. You don't understand the, hey, I'm just going to have somebody hang out at my house. I'm just going to take this person to the store with me. And how those window moments, windows of time, are some of the most impactful. They're maybe not always deliberate, like let's sit down and have coffee. It's as I'm going, you're going to go with me. William was exceptional at that. And so I think that was like something about it captured me. And I guess because it was so important. I remember being a youth pastor. And I was youth pastor. It was the second youth pastor tour I'd done. We were I lived in southern Wisconsin and worked in northern Illinois. It was like a 3-mile sort of space. But I had all these kids graduating high school, but not leaving. And I was like, I gotta do something with them. And I was already in love with young adults, but I was youth pastoring because there wasn't a lot of young adult ministry. There certainly wasn't full-time young adult pastors.
No, we went from youth group to singles ministry.
Yeah, unless you were doing missional work like Chi Alpha or on college campuses. But you weren't getting full-time gigs as a young adult pastor 15, 20 years ago. But I had all these young adults who were sort of leaving my youth group and had no place to go. There wasn't the in-between space. Because the singles ministry were sometimes old, creepy people in their 30s.
40s.
40s, yeah. And like you can't send an 18, 19-year-old kid into that. So I started this like apprentice program. And I didn't know at the time, I was not as well read as I am now, but that Dallas Willard, who's one of my favorite theologians, calls discipleship this idea of an apprenticeship of Jesus. And I just started having young adults in my house, and I started having little breakouts for them and training them and like trying to grow them into who God was calling them to be, and just had this affection for them.
Yeah.
Beyond this, like weirdly beyond the high school, middle school students I was in charge of, which is, I can only say now in retrospect, 15 years later, but was just sort of in love with that age because we used to teach middle school.
I did.
You taught 7th grade, which is like the middle of middle school. Mm-hmm. And we would always comment on how they would walk in at 4'2" in 6th grade and walk out in 8th grade at 5'8".
Yeah.
Like it was just this growth that was easy to see. The young adult years, especially in college, feels like that, but in a spiritual, emotional level.
Yeah.
They walk into freshman year 4'2". We're watching them grow into the 5'8".
Yeah.
And have some input into that. And I've wrestled this, and I've even talked to William about it. I feel like my input is so minimal. They feel like it's so maximal.
Yeah.
We had something weird happen to us that we didn't organize, choreograph, or even know about. This fall, December, the fall graduation of the university, we had a student who was part of Backyard, never attended our church, but ate tacos in our house often.
Spent a lot of time with him.
Great young man, can do incredible things both in the world and in the kingdom. And he was at the commissioning service and got to be one of the, I think, 4 senior student speakers. And he shouts out this list of people, and lo and behold, our name is in that list. And we were like, oh, that's sweet, because that's a great young man. We had more people come to us about getting the shout out of commissioning than anybody's ever came to us about anything else in our life, I think. And you and I don't think anything of of what we do.
Right.
It's just who we are.
Right.
Like, there's probably a college student that will show up at our house the next day or two. If not, for sure Tuesday when we have tacos. But usually when they come back to town, somebody wanders their way over.
Yes. We saw 4 of them in the grocery store on Thursday before our big snowstorm.
Yes.
We couldn't get away from them. They were all there.
And it's just who we are.
Right.
I don't have a better description for myself and for you, because I've known you a long time. It's just who we are. It's not for everybody.
No.
It's not for the faint of heart.
No.
Because I think more than even your own kids, the ones you mentor and disciple can break your heart.
Oh, 100%.
Like, you know your kids.
In good ways and bad ways.
Yeah.
In the just, disappointment of decisions, and then in the pride and proudness that you feel of the good decisions and the impact they're making. Both ways.
Yeah. I mean, we have a young couple that we did their wedding. She's been with us since she was...
Second semester freshman.
Yeah, a youngin', a freshie. And she's now married, and we spend, some time with her and her husband. We did their wedding, and it was funny to have her at the table and go, you grew up. Right? I mean, it was like, the things coming out of your mouth are so grown.
Right.
But it's part of the joy of it. Mm-hmm. And the other side of it is investing a lot of time and energy in somebody just to watch them walk away and make disastrous decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. Or that the working out their salvation and calling, it gets messy for them. And that's the hard thing. Which I look back and I go, oh, my poor people. They looked at me and said, oh, she made a mess of it. they still believed in me, though. They still believed in me, but did watch me make a mess of it and stuck around for the redemption of it. And I think that is also part of this, is that even if we do see them kind of making some errors or whatever, we're still sticking around for the redemption of it, because we don't give up that God can still redeem some of the poor decisions and poor things that some of them have chosen. But I mean, I still am in relationship with some that I started with. They're now 30 something, and I started with them when they were a freshman at Lee.
I had a young man send me a Shama for real reel. Shama's a Christian comedian, if you know who Shama is. He did this whole bit of of preachers using ladders in their illustrations. And Tim, who is always and forever be Timmy to me, because he was a student, and then he graduated and became one of the apprentices, and just became one of those spiritual sons, sent me this reel, and he goes, didn't you have a sermon where you used a ladder on a Sunday morning? And I was like, I think so. But, I mean, that's what happens.
Right.
You become, as a mentor, you become unforgettable.
Right.
And not because we're great. This is not a arrogance or pridefulness. It's because we spent a great amount of energy and time with them. Yeah.
Which is what led us to, if we're going to plant a church, which who knows how we came up with that idea. But if we were going to plant one, we wanted one where it could be, I think the word we used a lot, there's 2 words we used a lot: incubator and experiment. And those were 2 of the things that we really wanted, because we wanted it to be an incubator to grow kids who wanted to go into ministry or who were dipping their toe in that thought. Because we wanted to be able to give them a safe space to fail, because we knew they were going to fail, because we failed and everybody does. But a safe space to do that, and then just to see how would this work? What was the experiment part? How would it work if you just let a bunch of students come in and run the show? What happens?
Yeah. Well, you said, how did we get here? The truth was, we got here by saying it wasn't a church.
That's true.
After we get married in 2017, we were attending a local church, a place we call home no matter where we go, because it was home when we were young adults, and you had attended there during your time of being single, and it's just an important place to us. We were attending there as newly marrieds, We started a Bible study for young adults. We thought college and young adult became mostly just young adults, sort of the vagrant vagabond of that church. Those who didn't fit into the normative of it. And it sort of became their place.
Right.
And we would tell them, this is not your church.
Right.
But for them, it was their sanctuary.
Yeah.
It was their safe place. It was a place where they got both spiritually fed and physically fed. It's a place where we saw them learn things they hadn't learned from Scripture and learn things about themselves they didn't know.
Right.
Like, one of my favorite stories is we've come, since we've closed the collectives, and we'll come full circle in this conversation in a couple episodes, but we've gone back to that same church where we were doing young adult ministry, where we were young adults. It's this whole full circle thing. We had a parent approach us, their son, Ryan, who is literally a rocket scientist. He builds sort of widget boards that go up on rockets. He's every bit of what you'd think of as a rocket scientist. He's marrying a young lady from Australia, and they were over the moon. That's a play on words there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I got it.
I got it. Excited about this outcome. Mm-hmm. And we were one of the first people they wanted to tell.
Yeah.
Because of our investment in Ryan. We don't think anything of it. Ryan's a great kid. Love Ryan.
Yeah, not so much of a kid anymore, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, and so, but that was part of that window of time where we had these initially 5 young men. We were just doing the work of investing in.
Yeah.
And it became their church of sorts, and we were like, "Hey, this isn't your church."
Right.
And so we'll get to why we planted, but the short window of this one, and we'll put some bows on it here. I'll let you tell your story, and I'll prompt it here in a minute. But let me speak a little more because I like to talk. The sort of the narrative is like, you and I met in college. We had this incredible experience as college students. That impacted us forever. Mm-hmm. Built deep relationships with mentors and people who we are still indebted to, and I don't know how to ever pay them back. That led us to this point of when our lives intersect in 2017, that our passion point for college students just kind of merged into one lane.
Yeah. And
led us to this conversation, what do we do with it? What we did with it initially was create a Bible study.
Yes.
What we did with it 3 years later was start a church. And we'll talk about that in the next episode. But you have this principle that I want you to share with the listeners called the Gone with the Wind principle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So why don't you take us home with that thought and why that's so significant?
So one of my favorite movies is Gone with the Wind. All 4 hours, and I know not many people can hang with that.
Nope.
But there is a portion. There's some main characters. It's Melanie and Ashley Wilkes. They're married, and Ashley is fighting for the Confederacy, and it's the end of the war. And Melanie is staying with some friends, and then a large plantation in Georgia, and they take in all these soldiers, and be they Union soldiers or Confederate soldiers, and they're feeding them, they're washing their clothes, they're just caring for them because the war is over and they're just trying to get people back home. And somebody asks why Melanie is treating the Union soldiers with such kindness and compassion, making sure they have food and everything they need. And she says that I'm going to care for this soldier because my hope is in some Yankee town there is a wife and a mother who has my husband there, who's taking care of him, feeding him, helping him get back on his way home to me. And for me, that became the biggest principle when we started having our kids become young adults. Was that we knew they needed to go because, as my dad says, that acorns can't can grow into what they need to be under the shadow of the mighty oak. So you've got to roll and go out and grow. We knew that was part of it, growing out. And we had to sort of came to this place that I'm going to take care of the young adults and those that are entrusted to me, like Melanie Wilkes, whoever's in my yard, my space, and hoping there's somebody else who will take care of our kids as they go out into the world and pour into them.
We found it to be true, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And we think we continue to find it to be true as the last two finishing high school and becoming young adults. But I think it's a great principle when we try to live with and live by is who God puts in our yard we're going to care for, and believe that He's going to take our kids and give them the same love and care through other mentors and adults in their lives.
Right.
I don't know that it works 100%, but we're trusting that it does.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Always.
We're going to do it again. Okay. So I'm going to ask you the final question because I've never really asked you. I don't know if I've ever asked you.
Oh, my.
The final question in the Collective's conversation is called the Collective's Conversation. So if you could have one conversation with anybody, living, dead, historical, in real life, who would you have a conversation with?
Hands down, the Apostle Paul. He and I have a lot to discuss. I feel like we're similar, but I have a lot of questions. I need to know why he was so plain in some things and so shadowed in others. We have a lot to discuss. A lot.
Well, you're going to have eternity to work that out, I think. So.
I'm hoping on it.
Well, as I always say here at the Collective's Conversation, and 100% true for you always, is you always have a seat at the table.
Thanks.
We'll talk to you real soon. Wow, what a great conversation that was. Thanks for joining us in the conversation. If something from the conversation really stood out to you, would you share it and tag me on social media at Jeff_Pitts_ on Instagram? And we would love it if you would rate and review and subscribe to the show. That just helps us reach more people with these great conversations. And as we always say, you've got a seat at the table. Thanks for joining the conversation.